Sheikh Sharif Banna is an author, lecturer, and entrepreneur. Being a Muslim in a country where the population is mostly non-Muslims like the United Kingdom is quite a challenge. Al-Banna believes that wherever he is, his skill is what matters. This is proven with the success he has achieved. He is a successful entrepreneur and a CEO of a global award-winning publishing and media company, which has offices in 5 countries and operates in over 120 countries. As CEO of Awakening Media Group, as known as the record label who gave Maher Zain and Sami Yusuf to the world, the author of the Journey Through the Quran, as well as initiator and main lecturer of the world's first digital course on the Quran, Sheikh Sharif Banna has also lectured in Islamic law and ethics at Oxford University and is listed by ISFIN amongst the 500 people who are pioneering the Islamic economy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You are back on Sharia Economic Talk with Gunawan Yasni. In this episode, we will discuss about the struggles of an entrepreneur, author, and lecturer, his perspective on Sharia economics and finance, and how both of these fields that he dabbles in bring impact for Islamic economy globally. Joining us now is Muslim entrepreneur Sheikh Sharif Banna. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Sheikh Sharif.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Ustaz Gunawan. How are you?
I'm fine. What about you in Istanbul, right?
I'm fine. We're fine here with Allah's blessings and mercy. I'm currently based in Istanbul, although I live in London.
Okay. So you are UK based, but now you live temporarily in Istanbul. Great. Okay, Sheikh Sharif, I would like to ask you my first question. So in your perspective, what is Halal, Sharia, and the Islamic economy to your perspective, Sheikh Sharif?
I think these are 3 very deep terms that require a lot more than simply a basic definition. But because of the short time that we have for this program, I will attempt to give my perspective on all 3 terms in the order that you mentioned them. So halal for me refers to the permissible dimension of our faith, that which is allowed, that which Allah and His Messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, allow us to engage in, allow us to do, and it's the notion of permissibility.
Okay.
Sharia, although it also commonly refers to the legal dimension of the faith, in the Quran and in the Sunnah, the Sharia is more than just the legal dimension. Sharia refers to the path to commitment to God, path to the commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the legal dimension is one element of the Sharia, albeit the most commonly dominant element in our understanding of the Sharia. So for me, halal is the legal dimension. Sharia is the all-embracing spiritual, legal, moral, ethical dimension of our faith. And the Islamic economy, if we're to define the Islamic economy, I would define it as sectors whose core products and services are informed or driven by Islamic ethics and Islamic law. This is in a nutshell how I would define the Islamic economy.
Okay, so again, to your perspective, what is the global reaction to Muslims pioneering and developing halal and Sharia as, I would say, rahmatan lil alamin, Sheikh Sharif?
I think the reaction is quite mixed and varied actually, depending on where geographically Muslim consumers are located, depending on the sector interest, depending on the different markets. So we see in many Muslim countries a wave of new thinking, of new products, of new services, all built on the notion of halal and Sharia compliant. We also see many regulators, many government bodies and agencies, specifically in the Muslim countries, also pioneering this space. And I think in places like Indonesia, Malaysia, and other parts of the Muslim world are sort of pioneering this space. At the same time, we also see that in European countries, in Western countries, where Muslim consumers are actually a minority, but because of the interest in the halal market, in the Sharia compliant market, we see different services being offered to Muslim consumers, although they live outside Muslim lands, different regulations that we see the regulatory bodies also instituting and formulating. To give you an example, in the UK, I come from the UK, I'm based in the UK. We've had for the last 2 decades nearly, or at least for the last decade and a half, the whole Islamic finance sector being recognized by the government, by the Ministry of the Treasury, as a specific sector market that is appealing to Muslim consumers and also open to mainstream consumers as well. As a Muslim, I believe that our faith is rahmatan lil alamin, is a mercy to mankind. So for me, the challenge for Muslims and the challenge for the halal industry and the Sharia compliant industry is that how do we make our products and services not just halal or appealing to Muslims and believers, but how do we make that appealing also to humanity in the spirit of rahmatan lil alameen, in the spirit of hudan lin nas. And this is where I believe we need to focus as producers of services, as producers of products, on the ethical dimension of our vision, not just the halal compliance, not just the legal dimension, but focus on the ethical dimension of this notion of halal. This is what we find in Surah Al-Baqarah in verse 168, when Allah speaks about consumption and He says, Kulu and eat, He says, halalan tayyiba. Right? Eat that which is halal and tayyib. Tayyib here refers to pure. I think the halal industry, Muslim consumers have taken one part of the verse which is focusing on halal, the legal dimension, and we've neglected and not emphasized in the way that we should have on the tayyib dimension. And for me, the tayyib dimension is the ethical dimension. And with halal and tayyib, we have the legal ethical dimension of the Sharia itself. I say that, look, many of our engagement in this industry is halal but un-Islamic.
You're still on Sharia Economic Talk, of course, with me, Gunawan Yasni. Let us continue our discussion with Sheikh Sharif Banna. So, Sheikh Sharif, segment 1, it was so enlightening, but I would like to go deeper into this second segment. How do you see the world in perceiving halal and Sharia values of industry in general and in economics as well as in finance? Sheikh Sharif.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think the reaction is not monolithic. There is no one reaction or one perception towards Sharia compliant products and services in general, and specifically in the Islamic finance sector. I think the reaction is more or less varied. But when it comes to the Islamic finance sector, it is quite interesting to see a worldwide appeal and interest in the Islamic finance sector at large, not just in Muslim majority countries, but also in countries like the UK, in countries like America, in countries like Australia. So it seems that when it comes to Sharia as a lifestyle, there are certain reservations, there are certain suspicions, there are fears. But when it comes to Sharia as an Islamic finance proposition, as an Islamic economy, it seems that markets open, governments open, and there is generally a wide interest because it is to do with capital, it is to do with wealth. And I guess everyone's interested in wealth. Have to generate more wealth, have to spend more wealth, have to grow more wealth. So there is a huge interest in Islamic finance and Islamic economy, which doesn't necessarily translate into the other sectors of the halal industry.
Wow, I learned that you also have a strong critic then on the halal Islamic industry, as you mentioned before on the first segment, I guess. So what is your perspective into more details about halal is legal standing and Thayyib is the ethical standing? So what is your objection?
Yeah, I think there are several elements here, and I think building on what I said earlier about the distinction between law and ethics. Although there's a distinction, as Muslims and as believers, we believe in unity. We believe in organic, inclusive, wholesome understanding of life and faith. So for us, law and ethics are two sides of the same coin. And I would say, my objection or one of my major critique of the halal and the Islamic or stroke Sharia compliant industry is divorcing law from ethics. And what we see happening is that, and I'll give Islamic finance as an example here, that whilst there are many positive developments and many positive progress in terms of Sharia thinking, halal industry, governance, compliance, markets, consumer behavior, we also have to see that there are also drawbacks, there are also shortcomings. And as part of this shortcoming, we need to be wary that we are not just replacing a consumer-driven model with just Islamic and religious terms and religious identities and religious labeling. So for me, if we divorce law from ethics, if we divorce law from ethics from law, then in essence we are fragmenting Islam. We are fragmenting this notion of Sharia. We are fragmenting this notion of Islamic economy. The Quranic imperative is both halal and tayyib.
Yes.
And that's what we see. And I'll give you, if you don't mind, I'll give you two quick examples of what I mean by this. How do we divorce law from ethics? Let me give the example of the food industry. Many of us in the food industry care about halal food, and we should do. As believers, as Muslims, we should care about the halal, the nature of halal. Has it been slaughtered according to Islamic law and regulation? And we should pay importance to that. But how many of us focus on animal welfare? How many focus on how this animal was raised, how this animal was treated, what this animal was fed? How many of us focus on the ethics of animal behavior, how we as human beings engage with the animal? Not very few of us do. Very few of us do. Thus, our focus is simply on the halal legal dimension, leaving aside the moral and ethical dimensions of food consumption. Another example is Islamic finance and the economy. Again, it's very praiseworthy. I don't want to bring everything down that has been positive. But in the spirit of self-reflection, again, how Sharia compliant is Islamic finance? I have a background in Islamic law and I have a background in law, and I can see what is happening here. Or essentially what is happening in much of the Islamic finance industry is that we take conventional models, conventional processes, mainstream contracts, and essentially halalify them. If there is such an English word of halalifying, contracts, we take out clauses that are problematic, replace them with clauses that are, legally compliant. But again, do we go deeper into the Islamic economy? Do we go deeper into understanding what the economy is about? Is Islamic economy furthering the cause of socio-economic justice? Or is it widening the gap between the poor and the rich? Is Islamic economy focusing on environmental ethics when it is signing off on agreements as Sharia compliant? Does it stipulate, for example, for big contracts that are building mega malls or mega shopping centers to say, hey, look, we will give this, but we also need you to care about the environment, to care about sustainability, all of which fall under this Thayyib dimension.
Yes.
So this is why I say that, look, many of our engagement in this industry is halal but un-Islamic.
All right, Sheikh Sharif, this is getting more and more interesting, but we will take a break. We will continue our discussion next. Stay with us on Sharia Economic Talk with Gunawan Yasni.
Over the past, I would say, 3 to 4 decades, there's been a global awakening that people are thinking that if Islam is a way of life, and if our deen is rahmatan lil alameen, our prophet is rahmatan lil alameen, a mercy to mankind.
Over the past 2 decades, Awakening has established itself as a global Muslim media brand and the Muslim world's premier music label. Awakening won the inaugural Global Islamic Economy Award in Dubai, audited by Deloitte for the world's best faith-inspired and values-driven media company. Awakening Music has launched and managed the artistic careers of Maher Zain and Sami Yusuf, two of the world's most recognizable names in Muslim music. You are still on Sharia Economic Talk, of course, with me, Gunawan Yasni. We are still talking about Sharia economics and finance, but before we get into that matters, I would like to clarify some things with Sheikh Sharif Bana. Sheikh Sharif, you mentioned on the second segment about halal but not yet Islamic. Can you clarify, can you explain a bit about that, Sheikh Sharif?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it was meant to provoke reaction, so I'm glad you reacted to that. What I mean by halal but un-Islamic is that I believe anything that is halal meets the legal requirement of Islam.
Yeah.
Right? So this is the legal code of Islam, it meets that regulation. So have we slaughtered the animal using the correct methods, saying the basmala, saying the bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, etc. This is the legal dimension. And when we speak about the Thayyib or the ethical and the moral dimension, this is to do with a dimension that goes beyond the legal. And it focuses on the ethics. It focuses on the ethics of animal welfare, of raising the animal, of looking after the animal, of feeding the animal with wholesome food and transporting the animal in a way that is befitting. This is what I would call the ethical dimension. So for me, anything that is labeled as Islamic must meet both criteria, both the legal and the ethical. If it meets both criteria, it is, in my opinion, Islamic and Sharia compliant. However, if it falls short of the ethical dimension, then I call that halal but un-Islamic. Islamic, to label something Islamic is a very important term. And as you very well know, Ustad Gunwar, we don't label something Islamic very easily.
Yes,
so to label something as Islamic, we must make sure we are ticking both boxes. The box of law, halal, and the box of ethics and morality, tayyib.
Okay, very clear that. Okay, now let me just go to my next question. As CEO of Awakening Media Group, how do you connect the spiritual song industry with the awakening of halal and Sharia industry, including economics and finance, Sheikh Sharif?
Yeah, I think there's a very strong link actually. Over the past, I would say, 3 to 4 decades, there's been a global awakening, a global awakening of people's consciousness to do with their identity. That people are thinking that if Islam is a way of life, And if our deen is rahmatan lil alameen, our prophet is rahmatan lil alameen, a mercy to mankind, then this way of life touches many sectors, right? It touches our food, it touches our fashion, it touches our entertainment, it touches our learning, our education, our travel. So as Awakening, when we launched and pioneered Awakening nearly 2 decades ago in the year 2000 from the UK, we were part of this global consciousness, this global awakening of people trying to reconnect with their identity. And hence, we were able to connect globally with global markets, but making sure that we were offering products and services that were of utmost relevance, that were of excellent production, of excellent quality, and embodying this spirit of what the Prophet ﷺ speaks of in beautiful hadith about itqan, about striving for excellence, striving for perfection as much as we can. So I think as Awakening, as a media group, as a media company, we were able to connect and penetrate this global rising and global awareness of consciousness across Muslim consumer markets globally. So we were there, at the right time, at the right place, with the right products and services. I would also say that I wouldn't necessarily compare the, let's say, spiritual driven content or Islamic music content as we market and promote within the Awakening media group, but I wouldn't actually compare it with the mainstream or mainstream music industry. I would say that we are providing and offering not necessarily an alternative, but we are providing a spiritual offering with spiritually driven content, value driven content, family values content within the mainstream space. We are not here to compete with the mainstream. We are not here to be a replacement or an alternative, but we are here to provide an alternative for those consumers that will also who would want to connect with their identity, connect with their values, connect with their religious principles, connect with their religious heritage in a sense. But one indication I can give you, Ustad Gunawan, is that this year, just before Ramadan, Apple Music, everybody knows Apple Music, one of the global platforms for streaming music, they recognized Islamic music as an independent specific genre of music. And not only that, they've asked Awakening Music to become the sole curators on Apple Music platform for this category. So the fact that a mainstream major streaming platform like Apple Music is recognizing Islamic music as a specific genre is also, I think, a reflection of how this genre is increasing, how this genre is diversifying into different geographic regions and markets. The root word of Sharia, by the way, actually refers to a water source, something that takes you to the water. And what does water give? Water doesn't take life, it gives life.
You're still on Sharia Economic Talk with Gunawan Yasni. Okay, we will continue our discussion with Sheikh Sharif Banna. Well, I'm going to be straightforward to the next question. Awakenings of halal and Sharia moderations are globally accepted. How do you explain these awakenings, and how do you explain that there are even Muslims reject halal and Sharia moderations? Sheikh Sharif.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting point you raise here. It's an irony, no doubt, the dichotomy that you've raised. We see in many places, as you have rightly noted, the acceptance of halal and the acceptance of the Islamic economy or the Sharia compliant lifestyle in many non-Muslim spaces and majority countries. Whereas there may be in Muslim majority countries resistance and opposition and critique of halal and of Sharia compliant products and services. I mean, I have a couple of thoughts on that. I think the reason why many globally are accepting, even in non-Muslim spaces and in non-Muslim markets, is primarily due to two reasons. Firstly, I think there are market dynamics, that it's a different market. And the Muslim consumer market is a significant market. There are 1.8 billion Muslim consumers globally, so it is a market that any economy driven on a capitalist model would want to engage, would want to penetrate, and would want to have a market share of. At the same time, I also believe that there are many also like us as in the Muslim space, but outside the Muslim space, who are also looking at consumer ethics, who are looking at wholesome products, who are looking at products and services that care about the environment, that care about economic sustainability, that care about human welfare, that care about mental health, that care about psychological stability. And some of this engagement with Islamic economy, with Sharia, I think is also an exploration to see what kind of ethics, what kind of paradigms can Muslims bring to the table when dealing with some of these ethical challenges and some of these problems that consumerism, that overconsumption, waste, the lack of socio-economic justice and equilibrium that is driven by capitalist, free market, liberal models. That's on the side of, let's say, non-Muslim sort of spaces. Why there is a resistance from across many Muslim spaces, I think is quite unfortunate, and it's an irony. But I think primarily it's due to ignorance, I think, and primarily resulting from a lack of deep understanding of the Muslim faith. That the Muslim faith is a way of life, Islam is a way of life that can inspire, that can guide different aspects of our life. So whether that's consumption, food consumption, fashion, entertainment, travel, that Islam has brought principles and values that will guide that. For many, Sharia is also a very politicized word. So when you use the term, or when we use the term Sharia compliant, Sharia is a very, very problematic term and very much misunderstood term. So many, when you think of Sharia, think of the legal code, the penal code, the hudud, chopping off hands, the capital punishment, and likewise, all which form a very minute dimension of the penal code of the Sharia. Sharia is not about punishment, but Sharia in essence is rahmatan lil alameen, is a mercy to humanity. Sharia in essence is a pathway to God, is a pathway to live our lives in the best possible way that we can. The root word of Sharia, by the way, as you will probably very well know, Ustad Gunawan, actually refers to a water source.
Yes,
right?
Water source.
Sharia refers to a water source, something that takes you to the water. And what does water give? Water doesn't take life, it gives life.
Yes.
So the Sharia is for our benefit as Muslims and as the human race, not just in this world, but also in the hereafter.
Yes, yes. Oh my God, it's very well spiritually said. Now I would like to go to some discussion about awakenings. After 20 years, awakenings and plenty of hit records, record breakings, viewing figures, and global sold out tours. So what is going to be the next achievements, especially for Sharia, economics, finance, and halal industry that awakenings can really shake things globally? Sheikh Sharif.
It's a very good question that you're asking with regards to the future of awakening. And as you quite rightly noted, over the past 2 decades, we have been focusing and promoting this concept of Islamic music, Islamic art, Islamic culture, and we have brought to the world the likes of Sami Yusuf, Mahir Zaid, global, popular Muslim with content that connects, content that is relevant, and content that is also marketable. That's why we find the likes of Apple Music or Spotify interested in working with Awakening. The next phase of Awakening will look at creating content across other sectors. creating content across the publishing sector, across the children education sector, the children entertainment sector, with animations, with movies. So we are looking at a new wave of content production across different sectors. We realize that the Muslim lifestyle and the market that we have tapped into doesn't just want music, doesn't just want Islamic music,
Yes.
but they also want content across the different spaces. Content in education, content for children, content for movies, comedy, soap operas, etc. Again, our content, we want it to be wholesome, family-driven, global, connecting the East and West. We are not for a specific region. We are not just based in the UK or based in the Arab world. Our brand is global, and we hope to continue to carry this global brand proposition in any content that we inshallah bring out in the future.
Wow. Inshallah.
And for us to identify on an individual level, what are we good at? What can we excel in? To learn that, to deepen our understanding, to develop our practice, and to become masters of what we do. Islam and Islamic teaching should not accept mediocre.
You are still on Sharia Economic Talk, of course, with me, Gunawan Yasni. So, Chef Sharif Bana, I read some of your quotes, and I can try to bring up like two quotes. The first one would be, wherever you are, hold on to your skill, because your skill can be useful for others wherever you are. And then the second one would be, hold on to your religion and praise your nationalism. How do you come up with these two quotes, I guess? Probably I didn't mention it in a clear way. Maybe you can restate it.
No. You've captured the spirit. You've captured the spirit.
Yes. So how do you clarify that? Yes.
Yeah, no doubt you've captured the spirit, Ustad Gunawan, on this. There's no doubt. I think these are just from the teachings of our faith. To be honest,
Okay.
these are not really some quotes that I have deliberated over. But I think these are teachings of our faith with regards to living life with in a principle-driven way, in a value-driven way, wherever you are, in whatever you do, in whatever you may excel in, whether that be in your profession, your career, your entrepreneurship, your engagement with life, that there are principles. There are what is known in Arabic or in Arabic as qiyam, or values, or mabadi. These are principles which drive us. What makes us Muslim is our belief in God, our belief in the hereafter, our belief in prophets, but also the value system that Islam gives us. So no matter where we are, whatever situation we find ourselves in, we need to see how we can be a reflection of those values.
Okay.
With regards to the second reflection, with regards to professionalism, with striving for perfection, being good at something, all of us, Allah has endowed us with, each and every one of us, with a gift, with a talent, with something that we are good at. And for us to identify on an individual level, what are we good at? What can we excel in? To learn that, to deepen our understanding, to develop our practice, and to become masters of what we do. Okay. Islam and Islamic teaching and the halal industry and the Sharia and the Islamic economy should not accept mediocre. And lastly, that we should also put our skills to the use of our communities, our countries, our what is known in Arabic as our watan. To love one's nation. It is a saying, a wise saying that hubbul watani min al iman, that to love one's nation, to love one's community, one's homeland is from faith. We wish to see prosperous Muslim states, prosperous Muslim democracies, prosperous and successful Muslim economies, where we were not just consumers, but we were also producers, where our products and services don't pollute the earth, they nurture the earth, where we don't rely simply on our rationality or on science only, but we appreciate emotions, we appreciate feelings and what we term as spiritual intelligence. And we also hope to see Indonesian products also being globally present, being globally visible. And that would be my sort of advice also to sort of the Indonesian entrepreneurship, Indonesian innovation, that focus on quality, abide by values and principles, and also be confident of what you produce, so much so that it becomes a global demand, that people in America, in France, in Europe, in other parts of Europe, in the Middle East, they want this brand, they want this product. It is an Indonesian product, it is halal, it is Sharia compliant, but also most importantly, it is driven by values, it is wholesome, it is organic, and it cares about the environment, it cares about human welfare. So we need to sort of engage in all these different levels between philosophy, market, Islam, branding, and this is our journey. Our journey in awakening is just an example of that, and we hope to inspire many other global brands, many other global companies that to also take the lead in growing this global Islamic economy in a way that is halal and ethical.
Wow, oh my God. Thank you very much, Sharif Bana, for your advice to Indonesia, because surely Indonesia would like to be one of the centers for the Sharia economics and finance, including the halal industry. So then I must conclude. Oh, this is very hard. We've been talking very significant things during our episodes. Firstly, Sharia is not just about being halal. It is also being Thayyib. Halal is the legal form and Thayyib is the ethical form. Sharia is actually a path to the water source. So Sharia is not just for Muslims. Sharia is good for all mankind, as Allah said in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So we are all here to give the best, to give our best to all mankind, not just the Muslims, but also for the non-Muslims. I guess that was my conclusion, and that was our discussion. I hope that this episode is hopefully insightful and informative to spur Indonesia's spirit in becoming the beacon for the world Sharia economics and finance in the future, including the halal industry, of course. I am Gunawan Yasni, and the entire crew would like to say thank you for your attention. Goodbye. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Metro TV